I asked the bartender to deliver the divorce letter to the table. It was a simple folded sheet, discreet, almost harmless, but carrying a definitive sentence. There, between glasses of wine and complicit glances, my wife and her lover. She didn't see the envelope slide across the table into her hands. She was smiling, comfortable, as if that place was an extension of our home, as if that man next to her was the person with whom she had shared her life for years. My heart pounded, but I knew there was nothing more to say. The letter would speak for me. She opened the envelope, and I saw the immediate change in her face. The smile faded, his eyes widened, and his hand began to shake slightly. "What is this?" she murmured, her voice filled with surprise and a touch of desperation that she tried to hide, but which came through, evident and clear. The lover, who until then had maintained a relaxed posture, leaned over to see, curious, as if he had no idea what that could mean. All I could do was watch from afar, hidden behind a column in the bar, watching the scene unfold like a movie I wished I'd never started watching. The divorce letter was not just a punchline, it was a silent release, a subtle revenge that I had meticulously planned over the past few days. Because what she didn't know was that I had discovered more than the betrayal, I had discovered the secret negotiations, the hidden meetings that were not just trysts, but illegitimate business meetings, agreements made in the shadows that involved not only her heart, but also the future of something that was much more mine than hers. The betrayal started slowly, like a small crack in the wall. A different smile when she left the house, a distant look when I asked her how her day was. Little lies, inconsistent justifications. I wanted to believe that it was all in my head, that it was just a phase, but as the days went by, the clues accumulated. A message accidentally seen on her cell phone. A suspicious call in the middle of the night. And then one night I decided to follow. What I found wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. She was handing over everything I had built to him, piece by piece, and doing it with a smile that seemed natural, almost automatic, as if nothing was wrong. As if he were just fulfilling a duty, an obligation. I remember the day she tried to explain it to me, when I finally went to confront her. "It's not what it seems," he said, his voice controlled, trying to sound firm but failing. "You need to understand that," but I didn't let her finish. "To understand? What exactly do I need to understand? That you're handing over everything I built for him? That every word of yours these past few months has been a lie?" I saw her hesitate, open her mouth to respond and then close it again, as if she was trying to find an excuse that would be good enough to erase what had already been done. But there were no excuses. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it wasn't just emotional. It was financial, it was calculated, it was cold. When I realized she was selling the company's shares, the inheritance my father had fought to keep afloat, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just pride, it wasn't just love. It was the confidence that would never be the same again. She was throwing away everything she meant to me, to us, and she was doing it to him. He, who approached her with promises and hidden intentions, like a serpent that slithers silently before striking. And she allowed it, gave him the key to destroy everything we had built. I saw her holding the letter, her eyes scanning the words quickly, and then she looked around, as if looking for me. But I didn't let myself be seen. I wanted her to feel every bit of that bitter surprise. The lover, confused, asked what was happening. "What is this, love?" he said, with a tone that mixed curiosity and concern. But she didn't respond. He was in a panic, his eyes searching for a way out that didn't exist. And it was there, in that split second, that I realized I had one. Because while she was trying to find a justification for what was happening, I knew all the cards were on the table. She couldn't pretend anymore. It was a different pain that I felt. It wasn't like other pains that come and go. It was like something was being ripped away from me, something I would never get back. But there was also a feeling of relief, a weight that was slowly beginning to lift. I had lost the woman I thought I knew, but at least I had found the truth. And that truth was now there, written all over her face, visible to everyone who wanted to see. And I knew she never expected me to find out, for me to be able to confront her like this. She thought I would take the crumbs, that I would just settle for whatever she was willing to give me. But she was wrong. And now, as she held that sheet of paper, as she desperately tried to find a way out of this situation without completely destroying herself, all I could think about was everything I didn't already know. Because if she was capable of betraying me like that, if she was capable of lying and deceiving while looking into my eyes and telling me she loved me, what else would she be capable of doing? That was the question that would remain unanswered, a question that would echo in my mind long after the night was over. And as she got up from the table, stunned, trying to hide her nervousness in front of her lover, who was beginning to understand that this wasn't a joke, I could only smile. Because the game had changed, and she knew it. I had given her the freedom she wanted, but at a price she never imagined she would have to pay. Welcome to the channel. Here, we believe that betrayal is a choice that destroys lives, families and hearts. The stories you will hear are fiction, but the pain they portray is very real. Our goal is to show the devastating impact of disloyalty and the complexity of human emotions. So get ready, because what comes next is a shocking story, full of twists, secrets and difficult choices. Happy listening. The lights in the restaurant were soft, creating a cozy atmosphere that seemed to embrace everyone who entered. It was an elegant, sophisticated but not exaggerated place, perfect for discreet conversations and long dinners. In the far left corner, near the windows that offered a serene view of the lights reflecting over the river, sat the woman who, years ago, had sworn eternal love to someone who now seemed like a stranger. Amanda watched the movement of people around her, but her thoughts were miles away, stuck in memories of a time when things were simpler, when the love she felt was enough to fill any void. She was a woman in her mid-30s, with wavy brown hair that fell softly to her shoulders, and eyes that, even when she smiled, carried a shadow of doubt and melancholy. Amanda was known for her calm presence, a kind of natural elegance that never needed effort to stand out. When she and Richard got married, friends and family said they were the perfect couple. Both had promising careers, aligned dreams, and a home that exuded warmth and security. But what no one saw was the silent distance that began to grow between them, fueled by tiring routines and dreams that, over time, became conflicting priorities. Richard had always been a dedicated man. He was the type of person who took his work seriously, and this had been fundamental in building the small company he inherited from his father, a company specializing in interior architecture that, over the years, he had expanded. His dedication was admirable, but it was also what drove him away from Amanda, even though he refused to see it. For Richard, work meant stability, and stability meant security for the family he wanted to keep. He believed that every extra hour, every after-hours meeting, was proof of his commitment to their future. But Amanda didn't see it the same way. For her, every time he arrived late and too tired to talk or share a quiet dinner, it was a silent reminder that, perhaps, she was no longer his priority. Their relationship began to change in subtle ways. There was no fight that sealed the distance between the two, nor an explosion of anger. It was the small details that got lost along the way. The good mornings said with a kiss, the messages throughout the day just to say they missed you, the dinners that ended in long conversations about anything. The absence of these little things was what drove them apart, and neither of them seemed to have the courage to talk about it. Maybe out of fear of facing the truth, maybe out of believing that, somehow, everything would return to normal. Richard never stopped loving Amanda. He knew she was special, that she brought lightness to his life, a kind of peace he had never found in anyone else. But he also knew he was failing to keep the flame that had brought them together alive. There was always a new project, an important client, a contract that needed his attention. And he convinced himself that it was temporary, that everything would pass, and that he could make up for lost time. But time, he discovered, was unforgiving. I didn't wait, I didn't forgive distractions. Amanda felt suffocated by a loneliness she couldn't explain. It wasn't the loneliness of being physically alone, because Richard was there, every day. But he wasn't really there, and it made her feel like she was living with a stranger. She couldn't remember exactly when she started feeling this way, but she knew it wasn't something she could ignore forever. And it was on one of those nights, when Richard arrived home after another prolonged meeting, that she realized she needed something more. Something he, perhaps, could no longer offer. It was in this context that she began to look for new ways to feel alive. She got involved in artistic projects, returned to painting, something that always brought her peace, and even participated in events and courses on weekends, which Richard often couldn't attend due to work. These activities made her feel like she had a purpose, that her life wasn't completely stagnant. She met new people, made friends, and for a few moments, she managed to forget Richard's absence. But when she returned home, that empty feeling awaited her. And, without her realizing it, this emptiness began to consume everything she had in terms of hope for their future. Richard, in turn, did not notice the changes in his wife. He saw her go out to her events and courses, and was happy that she was finding something that made her smile. In his mind, that was a sign that she was okay, that she was able to occupy herself while he dealt with the commitments that kept everything in order. But he didn't see what was behind that smile. I didn't see the hidden pain, the disappointment she carried, the anguish of feeling invisible to the person who one day promised to love her more than anything. The nights they spent together were few, and when they happened, they were silent. Richard tried to talk, tried to bring up some topic that would rekindle that connection, but Amanda always seemed distant, with short and evasive answers. He didn't know how to get closer, he didn't know what to say to break the ice that had settled between them. And then, he did what he always knew how to do, he immersed himself in work, as if that would solve the problem. But Amanda was no longer willing to wait to see if one day he would understand what was happening. On the other hand, Amanda was not a woman who gave up easily. She tried in many ways to find a way to reach Richard, but each attempt seemed to sink her deeper into frustration. She wanted him to realize what was happening without her having to say it, as if words were a last resort she didn't want to use. There was something almost childish in the way she hoped he would just know, that he would see her the same way he used to see her years ago, when they were just two young people in love, full of plans and dreams that seemed to have no end. Their life was, from the outside, perfect. A beautiful house, a stable routine, cordial smiles at social events, where they were always seen as the exemplary couple. But behind closed doors, the truth was different. There was a tension they didn't mention, a feeling that they were trapped in something they didn't know how to fix. And that particular night, when Amanda left for yet another social event, alone, Richard felt a pang of fear for the first time. A fear that he couldn't explain, but that made him realize that, perhaps, he was losing something that was much more important than any contract or project. And that's when everything started to change. The lack of answers, the lonely nights, the forced smiles in casual encounters. Every detail seemed like a piece of a puzzle that Richard still couldn't put together. He felt something was wrong, but he didn't know where to start looking for answers. Maybe because, deep down, he feared what he might find. The last few weeks had been a blur of routine and failed attempts at connection for Richard. He made an effort to get home early, to attend dinner or, at least, share a conversation that went beyond the trivialities of the day. But Amanda always seemed distant, as if there was an invisible wall between them that he didn't know how to break down. Richard, for the first time, began to doubt his choices, the endless hours he spent working, and wondered if it was all really worth it. But instead of confronting Amanda and asking her what was going on, he did what he always did, he waited. He waited for her to come to him, to open the door for a frank conversation, a request for help perhaps. But Amanda was becoming more and more closed off, as if she had decided that certain things simply couldn't be said anymore. It was during one of these nights, when he once again found himself waiting for her in the living room, that Richard noticed something strange. Amanda had gone out to dinner with some friends, as she usually did, but it was almost midnight and she hadn't returned yet. Richard knew that, lately, she had dedicated herself to new social circles, activities he knew little about, but there was something about that night that bothered him more than usual. He sent her a message, just a simple, "How are you?" and stared at the phone screen, waiting for a response that never came. That night marked the beginning of a distrust he had never allowed before. In the days that followed, he began to notice small details that he had previously ignored. A perfume that he didn't recognize on her clothes, extra care with her makeup on ordinary days, smiles that seemed distant when they passed each other around the house. Richard tried to push those thoughts away, to convince himself that he was exaggerating, but there was something different, something he couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while at the office, he received a call that seemed ordinary. It was a client asking for adjustments to a project, and Richard quickly started writing down the details. But on the other end of the line, in the background, he heard a voice that sounded familiar. He turned around, trying to identify the sound, and it was then that he heard a muffled laugh that made his stomach turn. It was Amanda. She was in one of her clients' offices, laughing about something that had nothing to do with work, and suddenly, it all made sense. At the end of that day, Richard decided he needed answers. He remembered one of the courses Amanda attended, which said it was about contemporary art, something that never seemed to fit her style, and decided to go there, just to check it out. When he arrived, the place was almost empty, and he felt a little foolish for thinking he would find something strange. But as he watched people leave, his attention was caught by a couple who seemed lost in their own world, as if no one else was there. Amanda and a man Richard had never seen before. She was leaning towards him, a smile on her face, and he was touching her hand gently but intimately. Richard felt the world close in around him. For a moment, he couldn't move, as if his feet were stuck to the ground. The pain that rose through his chest was overwhelming, a mix of anger and disbelief. He watched helplessly as Amanda got up and left with the man, their hands still clasped together, unaware that she was being watched. Richard didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to confront them right then and there, but another, quieter and more rational part said he needed more than a scene like that. He needed to understand what had led Amanda there, he needed answers that he knew he couldn't get in the heat of the moment. That night, he went home before her and waited. When Amanda finally walked through the door, her eyes seemed brighter than usual, as if she carried a secret that made her come alive in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. She gave a slight smile when she saw him, but Richard realized it was just a facade, something she used to cover up what was really happening. "Was it a good night?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady without betraying the storm raging inside him. Amanda hesitated for a second, as if considering how to respond. "Yes, it was. I needed that, you know. To clear my mind a little." She smiled again, and Richard was almost convinced it was true. But then, he noticed something he hadn't noticed before, the smell of a perfume that wasn't hers, and certainly wasn't his. In the days that followed, Richard felt like a stranger in his own life. He began monitoring Amanda's every move, trying to find something that confirmed or denied what he feared. He followed her once or twice, watching from afar as she met with that same man in discreet places, out-of-the-way cafes, parks where no one would recognize them. Each encounter he witnessed was a blow to his soul, a pain that seemed unbearable and that he could not share with anyone. And that's how he started planning. Not a confrontation, not a fight, but a strategy. He needed to act carefully, because he knew Amanda was intelligent, and any false move would make her withdraw even more. And as he watched from afar, he began to put together a plan that he knew deep down wouldn't lead to the peace he sought, but would give him some control over the situation, something he felt he had lost long ago. When the day finally arrived, Richard knew he was prepared for any reaction from her. He watched her leave for another one of her social events, and followed her to a discreet bar in the old part of town. The scene was the same as always, but this time he was ready. Sitting in the opposite corner of the bar, he watched as Amanda and her lover met. He saw the smiles, the discreet touches, and he couldn't avoid the feeling that this was grotesque theater, a spectacle he never wanted to see. It was then that he called the attendant, handed over a sealed envelope and instructed him to deliver it to her desk. The attendant, confused, did as asked, and Richard prepared to watch what would come next. He saw Amanda open the envelope, the smile freezing on her face as her eyes skimmed over the cold, final words of the divorce petition. The lover looked at her, intrigued, and tried to ask what had happened, but Amanda was already panicking, trying to hide the letter as if it could undo what had already been done. Richard got up from the table, feeling a mixture of relief and almost unbearable pain. The betrayal was there, exposed, and there was no going back. The game had changed, and he was about to change even more. That night had started silently. After the episode at the bar, Richard retreated into his own world, trying to process everything that had just happened. It wasn't easy to see her there, smiling at another man like she used to smile at him. But seeing the panic take over her face as she read the divorce petition was, in a way, liberating. It was as if he had finally taken off the mask that Amanda insisted on wearing. Richard didn't go home that night. He drove for hours, trying to organize his thoughts, find some semblance of peace amid the chaos that his life had become. The feeling of betrayal still burned in his chest, but there was something more. Something he couldn't ignore, an even more bitter truth that was about to be revealed. The next day, he decided there was no more time to waste. He needed to confront her, but not just about the betrayal. Something else was happening, and he felt like he was on the verge of finding out what it was. What he had seen so far were just parts of a puzzle, and Richard was ready to put the pieces together. When he got home, he found Amanda sitting in the living room, the low lights creating shadows that danced on the walls. She was waiting for him, and for the first time in a long time, there was a look of genuine concern on her face. "Richard," she began, her voice wavering. "We need to talk." He nodded, feeling the weight of the words that were about to come. "Yes, we do." Amanda took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure, but it was obvious that she was nervous. "I know what you saw last night. And I'm not going to try to justify it. I just want to explain it." "Explain?" Richard laughed bitterly. "Explain what, Amanda? That you were with another man? That everything I thought we had was a lie?" She lowered her head, eyes fixed on her hands, as if she were trying to find strength somewhere inside herself. "I know it seems that way, and maybe it is. But it wasn't like that from the beginning. I swear." "From the beginning?" Richard repeated in disbelief. "Amanda, I saw you. I saw how you were with him. This isn't something that started yesterday, and you know it." She looked up at him, and there were tears there, but there was also something else, a determination he didn't recognize. "No, it didn't start yesterday. But it's also not what you think. I need you to understand that this is more complicated than just one case." "Complicated?" Richard exploded, feeling his anger rising. "What could be more complicated than the woman I love cheating on me with another man? I wasn't just with him for the sake of it." Amanda struggled to find the words, as if each one hurt her. "There was a reason." Richard crossed his arms, his gaze icy. "And what reason could justify that, Amanda?" "I'm listening." Amanda hesitated, and Richard could see the internal battle she was fighting. Finally, she sighed and let the words come out. "I was selling shares in the company, to him." For a moment, Richard thought he hadn't heard right. "What? The shares in the company? Those that belonged to your father, which passed to you?" She was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. "I was selling it to him. 4 months." Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. It was as if the entire world had stopped spinning. "You were selling the company shares? To that man?" She nodded, unable to keep her gaze from his. "Yes." "Why?" His voice was low, almost inaudible. He wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. It was an empty feeling, as if someone had ripped something out of him. Why would you do that? Because, we were broke, Richard. Amanda began to speak, and the words seemed to spill from her mouth like a desperate confession. You didn't see it, because you were always in the office, always working. But the company was sinking. And I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could sell some shares, just enough to keep things going, we could survive. He shook his head, still trying to understand. But why him? Why this man? You could have talked to me. We could have found a solution together. Because he offered me what I thought no one else could. Amanda choked on her own words, the pain evident in her voice. He offered a high price, something no one else wanted to pay. I thought I was doing the right thing, Richard. I thought I was saving everything you built. But you were cheating on me, he said, finally understanding what was hiding beneath the surface of that confession. You weren't just selling the shares, you were selling our trust, our lives. And all of this, why? For money. It wasn't just about the money, she shouted, and then immediately lowered her voice, as if realizing she had gone too far. I was scared. Scared of losing everything, scared of losing you. And yes, I got involved with him. I didn't plan it, but it happened. And when it happened, I thought there was no going back. He knew about the company, knew about our situation, and used it against me. Richard felt the pieces fall into place, and each one was a cutting blade. He blackmailed you. She nodded, thick tears streaming down her cheeks. I wanted to stop. I wanted to end it, but he said if I didn't continue, he would take the shares anyway. He threatened to expose the company, to destroy us. So you did what he wanted. Richard felt a mixture of compassion and contempt. You thought you were protecting me, but you were only destroying us faster. Amanda sobbed, her voice breaking. I don't know what else to say. I know I messed up, but I didn't know how to get out of it. I thought I was saving something, but in the end, I was just ruining everything. Richard approached her, anger giving way to deep weariness. I trusted you, Amanda. I gave you everything, and you just threw it away. I know, she whispered, barely audible. I know I screwed up, and I can't undo what I did. But if there's any way to fix it, I'm willing to try. He looked at her for a long moment, trying to find a reason to forgive her, but all he found was the echo of his own decisions, his own failures. I don't know if there's a fix for this, Amanda. You destroyed more than just our marriage. You destroyed our trust, and that, it's not coming back. Amanda sobbed silently, feeling the weight of his words like a blow she couldn't avoid. Richard, please. He took a step back, as if he needed to put some distance between them so he could think. I'll figure out what to do with the company. And you, do whatever you want. I can't fight for us anymore. She desperately tried to grab his hand, but he pulled away. Richard, please just listen to me. I've heard everything I needed to, he said, his voice cold, resolute. You made your choices. Now, I'm going to make mine. And with that, Richard turned away, leaving Amanda alone in the room, wrapped in her own guilt and regret. As he walked out the door, he knew the worst was yet to come. Because even though the betrayal was exposed, there was something she hadn't told him, something he needed to discover for himself. And that was what scared him. And what else could Amanda be hiding? The silence in the house was oppressive, heavy, as if the walls knew everything that had happened and were trying to absorb the pain that was spreading everywhere. Amanda sat in the living room, her hands still shaking, her face streaked with tears. Richard's words echoed in his mind, repeating like a hammer, each one carrying a silent condemnation. She knew she had lost something valuable, but only now, seeing him walk out the door, did she understand the true scope of what she had done. And perhaps, even worse than the betrayal, was the feeling that all his attempts to save something had been in vain. She had failed him, failed herself. Amanda slowly stood up, trying to find some strength within herself. She knew she needed to deal with the consequences of what she had done, but the pain seemed immeasurable, almost unbearable. He walked around the house, touching objects that used to bring comfort and happy memories, but now seemed strange, cold. Everything seemed different, as if she suddenly belonged to another life, to another person she no longer was. Meanwhile, Richard wandered the streets aimlessly, his thoughts spinning in circles, trying to understand where everything had started to fall apart. There was a mixture of frustration and sadness so deep that he felt like he couldn't escape it no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't just go home and carry on as if nothing had happened, but he also didn't know what to do next. Every choice felt like a trap, a dead end. However, Richard's mind was still restless. Amanda's revelation about selling the shares to her lover was only part of the story, he felt. There was something unresolved, something she hadn't told him, and it tormented him. As he walked down the sidewalk, he found himself thinking about the conversations he'd had with the company's former partners, the meetings he'd never been able to attend because he was too busy working on other projects. He realized he had left gaps in his life, holes that Amanda had filled, but in ways he never could have imagined. Amanda also couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she had with Richard. She knew he had every right to feel betrayed, but there was a part of the story he still didn't know. A part she never wanted to tell, because it involved more than just her mistake. It was a dilemma Amanda had carried with her, a choice she made in a moment of desperation. If she had been honest from the beginning, maybe things would have been different. Maybe they could have found a way out together. But now, the situation was irreversible, and the only thing left was to try to deal with the consequences. Amanda spent the night thinking, reliving every moment that led her there, every decision she had made. She knew she needed to be honest with Richard about everything. If he decided there was no future for them, she would accept it. But he needed to know the whole truth, he needed to understand the reasons that led her to do what she did. Even if it meant destroying any chance of redemption she might still have. The next day, Amanda decided she could no longer run away. She knew where to find Richard. He always went to the same cafe on Saturday mornings, especially when he wanted to think. So she got ready, trying not to look as dejected as she felt, and went there. When she entered the cafe, she saw him sitting at a table near the window, looking lost in the landscape outside. For a moment, she hesitated. I wanted to go back, I wanted to avoid the confrontation, but I knew I couldn't delay it any longer. Richard looked up and saw her approaching. He didn't seem surprised, but there wasn't any trace of warmth in his gaze either. Amanda sat across from him, without waiting for an invitation. For a moment, they were silent, just watching each other, as if trying to understand how they had gotten there. I didn't expect to see you here, he said, his voice calm but distant. I know, Amanda replied. But I need to tell you something I haven't told you yet. Something I should have told you before, but I was scared. Richard raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but without showing any emotion. More secrets, Amanda. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. I sold the shares because we were desperate, you already know that. But, what you don't know is that I was also trying to protect the company from something bigger. I found out there was a plan to buy it at a bargain price and then dismantle it, selling every piece like scrap metal. The man you saw me with, he was part of that plan. Richard frowned. And you thought the solution was to get involved with him? Was that it? I thought I could change his mind, I thought I could negotiate something better, a way out that wouldn't destroy us completely. She looked at him, her eyes pleading. I know it sounds insane, but I didn't know what else to do. He was pressuring me, threatening to expose our weaknesses in the market. I thought that if I did what he wanted, at least I could buy some time to find a solution. Gain time? Richard shook his head in disbelief. And that justified you getting involved with him, betraying everything we had? Because that's what you did, Amanda. You weren't saving the company, you were destroying both of us. Amanda felt the tears well up again, but she forced herself to continue. I know, Richard. I know I messed up, and I know I can't fix what I did. But what I needed you to understand is that I was trying to protect something you built. I was scared of losing everything, and I made terrible choices because of that fear." Richard looked at her, and for the first time, he saw the depth of despair she carried. It wasn't just a question of betrayal, it was a question of wrong choices made out of fear, out of not knowing how to deal with pressure. He felt torn between anger and a sadness that seemed even greater now that he began to understand. Amanda hadn't just betrayed her trust, she had lost herself in a desperate attempt to control what seemed out of control. For a moment, silence hung between them, filled with everything that had been said and what still remained unanswered. "I just wanted to protect what you built," Amanda repeated, almost in a whisper. "But at what cost?" Richard asked, his voice low and dark. "Was it worth it?" Amanda didn't respond. She knew that no matter how hard she tried to justify her actions, the damage was done. And the dilemma now was whether Richard could forgive, or whether the scars they had caused each other were too deep to heal. Amanda was silent for a long moment after Richard's last question. His words seemed to echo in the space between them, as if life itself was hanging in an invisible balance, awaiting a verdict. She knew that no apology, no attempt to explain could erase what had happened. Whatever he had tried to protect now seemed insignificant compared to what he had lost. And in that instant, she realized that perhaps there was nothing left that could be saved. She had risked everything and, in the end, destroyed the very thing she most wanted to preserve. Richard looked away, watching the movement of the coffee as it began to fill. He felt a strange calm, a bitter acceptance of the situation. There was no anger, just a deep sense of sadness and tiredness. It was as if he was exhausted from fighting something he knew he could no longer change. Amanda had made mistakes, but he also hadn't been able to see the signs, to realize that she was drowning in the midst of it all. And now, they were both paying the price. "I'm going to sell the company," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Amanda looked up, surprised. "I'm going to sell it to someone who can take care of it, who knows what to do to keep it working. But it won't be for him," he added, his voice firm. "I have already made it clear to our lawyers that any offer from his group will be automatically declined." Amanda wanted to protest, wanted to say that they could try another solution, but the words died in her throat. She knew that Richard had made a decision, and that this was the only way he saw how to move forward. He was severing the last tie that connected them to the past they had built together, and the pain of that was unbearable. "Richard," she began, voice shaking, "if I could take it back, would do everything differently. I never wanted to hurt you like this." He looked at her, and there was an unexpected kindness in his eyes, a kind of compassion Amanda hadn't expected. "I know. But sometimes wanting to do right isn't enough." He sighed, tired. "We both made mistakes, Amanda. I was so focused on protecting what I thought was important that I ended up neglecting the only thing that really mattered. But I can't go on like this anymore." Amanda felt her chest tighten, as if she was about to lose her breath. "What do you mean?" "I'll move on," he said, voice firm but soft. "I'm going to sell the company, reorganize my life, and try to find a new beginning. And I think you should do the same." She shook her head, as if trying to dispel the idea. "No, please, we can try. I know we can." But he smiled, a sad smile that seemed full of resignation. "Sometimes trying harder just hurts more, Amanda. And I don't want us to keep hurting each other. Not like this." He paused, and then said, almost in a whisper, "I hope you find your peace. And I hope I can find mine too." Amanda couldn't hold back her tears. She knew those were Richard's last words to her, the end of a story she had ruined with her own choices. But at the same time, there was something liberating about it. He was not filled with anger, nor did he hate her. He had forgiven her in a silent way, accepting what had happened and giving himself the chance to start over. And even though it meant the end for both of them, it was the kind of closure she never expected to have. Days later, Richard began the process of selling the company. He met with potential buyers, always careful to ensure that the name his father had built was not tarnished. It was a difficult but necessary task. During one of the meetings, he received a proposal from a smaller but solid company, led by a local businessman who admired his family's legacy. Richard realized this was his opportunity to finally let go, knowing he was passing on something that would be valued. Amanda, on the other hand, found herself alone, for the first time in years, without the support she had built over time. She decided to completely cut off contact with the man who had blackmailed her, even though she knew it wouldn't erase the mistakes. She began attending therapy, seeking to understand why she had made the decisions she did, and little by little, she began to rebuild her life. He decided to return to art, something that had always brought him comfort, and over time, he began to exhibit his paintings. They were images of sadness, loss, but also of hope, an attempt to find some beauty in the midst of pain. Richard and Amanda did not see each other for many months, until, at a social event he attended for work, their paths briefly crossed. She was accompanied by some friends, and he saw her from afar, smiling in a way that seemed sincere. For a moment, they exchanged glances, and Amanda gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging that she had accepted the past, that she had found a way to move forward. Richard returned the gesture, feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized that, despite everything, they had both found what they were looking for, a way to start over. At that moment, he knew he was free. Free from pain, resentment and everything that had tied him to those months of uncertainty and sadness. Life had moved on for both of them, in different ways, and although the past could never be erased, they had found a way to live with it. And just like that, one chapter ended. Richard found a new direction, dedicated to rebuilding his life away from the shadows of what happened. Amanda followed her own path, determined not to repeat the mistakes that brought her there, and they both somehow managed to find peace in what seemed irreparable. If you liked this story, leave your comment below. We want to know your opinion. What did you think of the ending? Do you believe Richard made the right decision? And Amanda? Could you have done something different? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful and exciting stories like this. And remember, here, we never support cheating. Betrayal destroys lives, hearts and trust, and the consequences are always painful. Until next time.